Randy Savage is one of the most iconic figures in professional wrestling, a performer whose intensity was as fierce in real life as it was in the ring. But for all of his greatness, working with Randy wasn't always easy. His perfectionism, short temper and unwillingness to compromise made him a divisive figure in the locker room. In today's video, we're taking a look at the wrestlers who found themselves on the Macho Man's bad side and how those grudges played out behind the scenes. When Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan joined forces to form the Mega Powers, it felt like the biggest alliance in wrestling history. These were the two biggest superstars in the WWF, and now they were standing side by side. But eventually, it all came crashing down in one of the most memorable storylines of the era, when Randy turned on Hogan. But while the explosion of the Mega Powers was a brilliant piece of storytelling, there had been real-life tension simmering away between the men backstage. The Mega Powers story was built around Randy's paranoia over Miss Elizabeth. Elizabeth wasn't just his manager, she was his wife, and as far as he was concerned, the WWF locker room was full of predators trying to take her away from him. It got so bad that Randy allegedly kept her locked up on her own backstage while he was out wrestling, so none of the other guys in the locker room could talk to her. Hogan's involvement in their lives blurred the line between fiction and reality. Elizabeth was my manager and there were no steps to the ring. She was maybe 95 pounds soaking wet, so I reached over the top rope, grabbed her by the armpits and lifted her into the ring. Randy said, "You son of a bitch, you grabbed her boobs." He put me in a tight headlock during the match. I'm hanging in there and I didn't want my eyeball to pop out, so I grabbed his waist. I told him, "Randy, if you don't let go, I'm going to dump you on your head." We had a horrible match. Backstage I told him, "We need to talk." When I opened the door, I ripped it off the hinges. We talked and Randy apologised. I apologised too. I think the door coming off kind of cooled everything down. Eventually, Randy's controlling nature became too much for Elizabeth to deal with, and she left him. During the breakup, Hogan and his wife Linda invited Elizabeth to stay with them at their home when she was in town. Randy had been trying to call Elizabeth, and he grew increasingly suspicious when his calls went unanswered. His paranoia, for once, had proven to be correct. He boarded a plane and flew straight to Miami. When Randy arrived at the house, his temper boiled over. According to Hogan, he stormed into the house and burst into Linda's room, demanding to know where Elizabeth was. Shortly after, Elizabeth filed for divorce. There are rumours that the black eye that Hogan had at WrestleMania 9 came from Randy. Hogan claims that the injury came from a jet ski accident, but Jim Cornette has always maintained that Hogan and Randy got into a fight over the Elizabeth situation and the Macho Man punched the Hulkster in the face. Randy's paranoia towards Hogan never went away, and that included when they were together in WCW. While the two men appeared to be on better terms with each other initially, Randy reportedly believed that Hogan was using his influence backstage to keep him out of the spotlight. In an interview, Randy said, "We've been acquaintances at best, never been best friends, never been friends. Just a business type thing on the television. Everybody knows it's sports entertainment, entertaining the wrestling fans. But sometimes what goes on behind the scenes is stronger than the soap opera on the videoscope." And that's what happened with me and Hulk Hogan. Even after their in-ring careers came to an end, Randy found new ways to express his hatred for the Hulkster. In 2003, he released a rap album titled "Be a Man", and on it was a diss track aimed directly at Hogan. But this wasn't the first time that his paranoia around Elizabeth had shown itself. We need to go back to 1986 and one of Randy's first feuds in the WWF against George the Animal Steele. Steele's gimmick was that of a simple-minded man-child with a habit of chewing the turnbuckles. In the storyline, Steele developed an innocent crush on Liz, which struck an emotional chord with the fans, who saw it as a sort of Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. They cheered on Steele with the hopes of him winning the heart of Miss Elizabeth, while Randy played his part of the villain, determined to keep them apart absolutely perfectly. The fans weren't aware of Liz and Randy's real-life relationship with each other at this point in time. As far as they were concerned, she was just his manager. But in reality, Randy didn't have to do much acting here. In fact, he genuinely hated the entire story just because of the entirely fictional idea that Steele was trying to bag his woman. By 1992, Vince McMahon believed that Randy's days as an in-ring performer were winding down. Randy's final major feud saw him drop the WWF title to Ric Flair in September 1992, and not long after, Vince shifted him to the commentary table. While Randy was actually a decent announcer, he didn't ask for the role, and he wasn't ready to step away from the ring. And the fact that Vince effectively forced him into retirement without consulting him seriously pissed him off. In 1994, Randy made a decision that shocked the wrestling industry when he left the WWF and jumped ship to WCW. According to Bruce Pritchard, it was a painful moment for Vince. It was a Monday morning when Randy called up and told Vince that he was going to WCW, and Vince was not happy. He was hurt. Randy had always said, "I won't do you like Hogan did. I'll be the guy. I'll be your Babe Ruth. I'll always be here." Then out of the blue, with no indication on our end, he jumped ship. Vince wanting to make Randy an employee and bring him into the office and all these other things. And out of the blue, "Yeah, I'm going to WCW." And that kind of upset Vince. So yeah, it was hurtful. It really hurt him. It was rare for someone leaving the company to affect Vince this deeply, which made people wonder if something else had happened between them, whether it was just about him not wanting Randy to wrestle anymore or something bigger, including one persistent rumour about Savage having an affair with Vince's teenage daughter, Stephanie. But whatever the real reason was, it was enough to keep Randy away from WWE for the rest of his life. In 1994, Paul Levesque, aka Triple H, was still making his way as a rookie in the wrestling business. He'd been appearing for WCW, but he was about to move on to the WWF. And just as he was leaving, Randy signed with the promotion. He suggested to the booking team that they should squash Paul on the way out in a quick 5-second match. It was a tradition that he'd learned from Vince McMahon, that the talent who was leaving the company lost on the way out. Ric Flair was on WCW's booking committee at the time, and he pushed back on the idea. Flair thought it was unnecessary to bury a young talent in this way. He was of the belief that what goes around comes around in the wrestling business. Randy accepted the explanation and the fact that things were done differently in WCW compared to the WWF, but Triple H carried animosity towards Savage for years after. By 2004, Triple H had cemented himself as one of WWE's top stars, and around this time he gave an interview where he referred to veterans like Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan as dinosaurs. Hogan just brushed the remark off, but Randy wasn't so easygoing. He released a video on his website where he dissed Triple H and said that he was going to steal his wife, Stephanie McMahon. Controversial comments, considering the rumours that were still flying around about Randy and Stephanie from when she was a teenager. Randy had to adjust to a whole new locker room environment when he joined WCW, and that came with its own politics and disagreements. In 1996, WCW had a partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling, which led to talent exchanges and cross-promoted events. As part of this, both Randy and Road Warrior Hawk appeared for New Japan. The men had a nasty confrontation backstage at a show in Tokyo, with the rumour being that Hawk thought that Savage had been flirting with his wife. Either way, Hawk was pissed off, and so he delivered a right hook that knocked Randy out cold. The animosity between the two men stuck around for years, and in 1999 it was reignited. Coincidentally, both men were attending a Kid Rock concert in Florida when they ran into each other. Hawk reached out to Randy to call a truce, but instead of shaking his hand, Savage responded with a surprise uppercut. As Hawk was knocked to the ground, the altercation escalated when Randy's girlfriend and her friend attacked Hawk's wife, which led to her being badly injured. Hawk publicly stated that they intended to take legal action, but in the end, that never happened. Randy's intensity and unpredictability followed him throughout his career, and that altercation with Hawk was just another example of how that fire never truly burned out. But to understand just how far back this violent side of Randy went, we need to rewind to the late 1970s. The heat between him and Bill Dundee was born from a mix of business and personal animosity. This issue was from before Randy had joined the WWF in the early 80s, when he was part of International Championship Wrestling, which was his father's wrestling promotion. ICW operated as an outlaw promotion, meaning it wasn't aligned with the National Wrestling Alliance or any of the established wrestling territories of the time. The territory that ran the Memphis area was Jerry Jarrett's Continental Wrestling Association, where Bill Dundee was a major star. ICW was the renegade promotion in the area. Savage and the ICW boys often cut promos on the Continental wrestlers, calling them out publicly on television. Most of the Continental wrestlers just brushed it off and ignored them, as they saw ICW as a bunch of outsiders trying to cause trouble. But Bill Dundee took it personally. Bill would quite often be the one that responded in kind. Tensions eventually boiled over when a confrontation happened at a gym in Tennessee. Dundee was working out there when Randy and some of the ICW boys surrounded him in the parking lot. Dundee apparently felt like he was surrounded, and so he pulled out a gun. Depending on who tells the story, Savage either disarmed Dundee and struck him with the weapon, or a brawl ensued in the parking lot. Either way, Dundee was left with a broken jaw and had to take time off from wrestling due to it being wired shut. After the fight, Savage and his dad Angelo filed charges against Dundee for assault with a deadly weapon, and Dundee filed counter charges. In the end, both sides agreed to drop the charges because it was dragging on, and they both wanted to get back to their wrestling careers. It just goes to show that Randy Savage was very close in real life to what you saw on TV, an intense and hot-headed individual that you didn't want to get on the wrong side of.